Welcome to week 7. Almost done. Going to look at something that probably is important to everybody in the class. It's working as part of a team and working within groups. So some things we're going to look at is get an idea of kind of the dynamics of groups and teams. We're going to look at some of the common problems that happen when working in a group or team. We're going to look at the conditions we have to put in place in order to make our teams or organizations work. And we're going to look at kind of some examples from sport management. So, leadership is taking place pretty much everywhere. Well, a lot of times we look at it from the standpoint of, just what's happening on the court or what's on the field. But there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, a lot of stuff that people like event coordinators, the athletic directors, that, team owners do that people don't see. And it takes all of this stuff in order for it to work. So teams are real important in an organization. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that there's a lot of restructuring that's going on within an organization. So you're getting some downsizing that takes place. You get a much more complex environment, and you've got technology that can make it more effective, but can also create problems. So what that's happened, or what that's caused, is it's made leaders to have to learn how to not only use the old type leadership skills, management skills that we've all talked about already in class, but they're having to come up with new ways, new things to do. So the first thing we want to talk about is this idea of group decision maker or group decision making. So in this context, whoever the leader of the group kind of decides what's going to happen. They decide the process that the group's going to be. So things that they're going to look at is, what's our time frame for getting something done, or for getting what we want to get done. How much weight does the leader hold? Have they been given complete control of the group? Is it supposed to be a collaborative type of deal? And then how much conflict do they want? And the easy answer is to sit there and say, well, we don't want conflict. That's not always really good. Actually, if it's the right kind of conflict, it can kind of create some really creative situations where a lot of really good stuff is developed. So, as group members, become more interdependent, it kind of increases the inclusive decision making that they have. So, if you look at this chart, this is kind of going to give you an idea of just some ways decisions are made and some things to think about. And so what you've got on the left column is how the decision's made. You've got, based on that decision, in the second column, the level of influence that a group member might feel like they have. The third column is going to talk about the potential that you're going to get conflict. And then the last column is going to talk about the time it's going to take to make a decision. And so I think this is pretty interesting to look at and to understand, because if you look at the top of the chart where a group leader makes the decision along, obviously the group members are going to feel nothing in that. You're probably not going to have a lot of conflict, but if the decision's not a good one, then there's probably conflict coming, down the future. And this is a real nimble way of doing things. Whereas if you look, in the middle, where a group leader consults with a group to receive impact or input and makes a decision, you're going to get a pretty moderate level of group members feeling like they have an influence. You're going to have a low conflict with everybody's getting to have their say, but it's going to take a while to make the decision. So, not saying one's right over the other one, you just have to understand it's going to be different based on the decision you're making. So, real important concept that we need to understand is this idea of groupthink. And understand that even the most highly functioning groups, the most cohesive groups with the best leaders, will make poor decisions. it doesn't take very long to look and think about, various sporting leagues and look at some of the terrible draft picks that organizations have made. Well, there's a group of people who decided, hey, we think that's the best decision. So it's not like it's one single person. So, groups that are isolated, within themselves and they don't have a whole lot of outside influence, they tend to have a lot of tension, end up in high stress type situations. And groups are likely to have somewhat of every one of these 8 symptoms of groupthink that I'm going to talk about. But just understand that, just because you have a great leader in a great group doesn't mean they're going to make great decisions. Sometimes they feel, for whatever reason, like they have to make a decision, stick together, not speak out, afraid to speak out, and you get all kind of issues. So here's some issue or some symptoms of groupthink. So the first one's illusion of invulnerability. So this is basically occurs when there's a collective agreement that the group is somewhat invincible. Okay, and so for instance, you see this a lot when an organization takes on a player with the idea that, hey, that player is not going to affect our culture. The second one is collective rationalization. This happens when a decision's at the final stage. And it's where group members basically create a reason why the decision will work to solve the problems. And so they're trying to rationalize their decision. Then you get the third one is stereotypes of outgroups, and this occurs when the group paints anybody as being outside of their group as being not of the same quality or not superior. Fourth one is belief in inherent morality of the group. This is basically where group members think that they have the moral high ground. Prime example, the Dallas Cowboys like to label themselves as America's team. The fifth one is placing direct pressure on dissenters. This is dangerous because this is where the group, where some of the people might disagree with the group decision, and they're basically kind of shut up from being able to express why they think it's a bad decision. You have self-censorship. This is where pressure basically within the group will cause other group members not to voice that they do have an issue. You got an illusion of unanimity, which is basically that nobody in the group has misgivings about the decision, although there are actually people in the group that do disagree. And then finally, you've got the self-appointed mind guards, and this is basically where groups will shield themselves from anything from the outside that might cause the group to think any different. So a couple other kind of, ideas that you need to know about group work is social facilitation. This is where group members kind of provide the support and encouragement to their members to make them productive. And this completely is determined by the task. So if the task is pretty easy to learn, having other people around you will cause the performance of the group to increase. But if the task is difficult, or it's something that's hard to learn, or something that's not familiar, then the presence of having people around you will actually, in the group, will make it harder to do. Then you have social loafing. Everybody has dealt with this. And this is basically where people in the group will basically give less effort than they perform on the same task alone. And this social loafing is really prominent where you have really good performers in a group that basically compensate for the bad performers. And it happens a lot where when people aren't held accountable, and there's no way of safeguarding their individual contribution. And so we have to think about this from the standpoint of when we're putting in groups that smaller groups tend to work better than larger groups. This mainly is because you get to know each other better. You have this perception that you're getting social support, and the more people you add to the group, the less interaction you have. So the ideal is about 4 to 6 people, and the leader of that group, they're the one that's going to kind of decide how that's going to go from the beginning. How are we going to structure it? How are we going to make this thing work? And so Steiner's typology of task is something that's going to outline basically tasks that are better suited for groups and ones that are better suited for individuals. And so it's something important to know. So if it's an additive task, group performance is a task where group performance is summed up, meaning everybody has to pull their weight. And so something like tug of war or relay races and additive tasks are more subject to social learning or social loafing, meaning that because it's a summed deal, people are more likely not to pull their weight. If it's a disjunctive task, the end product is a function of whoever the best member is. So for instance, one where you only count the best score. And so this is one where a group might be given, like, say, the idea of coming up with a theme night for a promotion. And whoever comes up with the best one is the one they go with. Then you have conjunctive, which is the end task is the function of the weakest link. So this is something example like mountain climbing. This is basically where you're only as good as who your weakest member is. You have compensatory ones where the end product is averaging everybody's work together. So, for instance, like some Olympic events, gymnastics, for example. And so this is one where it kind of suits us well to group work. You have discretionary tasks, which are the ones where the group has full autonomy. That means they decide how each individual's efforts are combined. And so this is really kind of a natural fit for teamwork. So as we look at putting together teams, there's several kind of conditions that need to take place for teams in order for them to be set up to where they can be successful. The first thing is you have to have a real team. So there's 3 things that really go into a real team, and one is that you have to have interdependence, which it means that you're using people's best abilities and skills to help the team. You have to have defined roles. I mean, you have to know what it is that everybody is doing. And ideally, you would want it to be stable. And that's very hard in a lot of industries, particularly coaching and athletics, because there's a lot of turnover. I mean, you look for how often Nick Saban turns over assistant coaches. It's hard to have that stable environment. Next thing you have to have is you have to have a compelling direction, meaning that you have to have engaged goals, a vision, and you have to put safeguards in place that kind of sets the moral compass for which way we're going to reach those goals. People have to know where they're going. Some other things, you have to have an enabling structure. What I mean by that is you have to have the right size group or team with the right amount of skills, and there are people with the right skills. And then they have to feel like there's a cohesion. You have to build that team structure. You have to have a supportive organizational structure, meaning that I've got to have something in place that rewards not only the group, but also rewards the individual. And a big part of that, guys, is they have to have access to information. They have to have systems in place where people get the information they need in order to be able to do their job. And I think this is hugely overlooked, and that's a hugely frustrating part of higher education, is that a lot of times you're tasked with doing something, but you're not giving the information that you need to actually make the decision. Then the final step is you have to have expert coaching. You have to have people who are leading and are able to mentor the team or mentor the group and able to develop each individual person's abilities. So this is Hill's model for team leadership, and this is just a kind of a quick way to see how this thing goes, and we'll kind of talk through it. But it starts at the top with leadership decision. What are we trying to do? We have to determine whether those leadership decisions have to happen within our group, so internal, or they have to take place external or outside the group. So some internal things we would look at are task actions. These are things like setting up our group that's first best to make decisions, getting the proper training, getting the standards set, the goals set. Then you have kind of relational type deals, and these are things that have to do more with not so much, I don't know the best word to describe it, not so much hard skills you can see. It's more like teaching them how to work together, how to manage conflict, how to do work that satisfies their needs. And so you have to focus these actions on team members in order to get this high performance level that you want. Then you have stuff outside of the group, and these are things that really kind of matter but are overlooked a lot about. Teaching them how to network, how to advocate for the group, how to negotiate to get what the group needs. Some of this might be buffering the group from some of the stuff on the outside that might threaten the success of the team or group. It gives an example here of a post-event press conference could negate something bad that might have happened, or kind of soften the blow to a potential group or a team. And so as we're looking to build this team effectiveness, which is at the bottom of the thing, we've got to have a couple of things go on. We've got to have quality decision making, and decision making where we're not afraid to have disagreements and work out the best thing. We have to have, and this is another frustrating part, is you have to have the ability to actually implement what you come up with, which is frustrating sometimes. And then you have to have that ability to actually solve the problem and complete the work. I get frustrated because a lot of times I'm tasked in groups or committees to look at a problem that we never solve. And then we have to worry about this, not only getting stuff done, but we have to worry about the kind of developmental side, the relational side of, our group members feel like they're a part of this deal. Are they satisfied with what they got out of it, with their contributions that they made? And that's important. And shift gears end up, and we don't spend a whole lot of time on this, guys, but with technology developing like it is, obviously you're in a completely online master's program, it's going to allow us to work with people all over the world. And there's a little bit of things that are different when you're dealing with a group or leading a group that's virtual. You still have to do the kind of same things of establishing what you want the team to do, but you have to work extra hard to work on communication, collaboration, and really making people stay engaged working in those groups. And this is difficult, because you're likely going to have people from, different states, different countries, different time zones. And you're having to really think a lot about how do I plan this to make it work. And so, a kind of standing tip is you want to make sure that these external kind of teams or these virtual teams have somebody who's kind of steering the ship, somebody that they're reporting to, somebody that's giving them a task for what they're having to do, somebody that's holding them accountable. Because it's not the same thing as being able to, have a boss on site who can come in and meet with a group. You have to have somebody who basically holds that same role that would happen if it was an on-site meeting. So you guys are doing a great job. I'll post our final assignment this week, guys. Let's finish up strong and head into fall break, finishing up your first 2 classes towards your master's. I appreciate all your great work.